Around 9 months ago, I posted my first tier list to gather some feedback and to test the waters on an unedited video. After going through some of the frames I received comments about, I decided to wait until there was a meta shakeup before posting my update. Luckily, the old piece in 2026 landed around the same time, so it's a good time to post an edited, updated tier list. To say the obvious up front, Warframe is an easy game. No content should be or is currently made for a squad of LR5s with 400 plus form on their accounts. This tier list is my opinion. Like last time, it's bound to have inaccuracies or blind spots because I don't like every frame equally. My number 1 to 3 off the dome is Kalervo, Octavia, and Harrow, and as such, I feel they're stronger on average than people who don't like playing, testing, or seeing them in missions. If you like Bobbin, you'll play Bobbin, practice his builds, become aware of enemy spawns that mess him up, and memorize niche synergies between his kit and guns. I am fortunate that I have almost everything maxed, so I'm speaking from a place of I'm bored, let's try making Corvex fun / playable and tossing 5 form onto him. My main criteria for the tier list is 1. Comparing frames within their roles, 2. Considering my personal willingness to play them in endgame modes with random teammates and gear, and number 3. Adding in how many modes the frame excels in and how flexible are their builds. A good example is Neja, Gara, and Noko can be a lot of things at once, but Neja and Gara can't do all their things in one build. Noko can without augments, and it's why he's rated so highly. To talk about the meta of the old piece, we've recently gotten tools that reward you for staying alive. The most notable is Vazir's Tower Stake, which can save doomed missions by itself every 2 minutes. With all that out of the way, let's move on to S tier, which holds the best in slot for their roles / my picks for the frame side and balance the game the most. Oberon got his rubric and has promptly destroyed the support roster. His ability to enable equilibrium builds, strip armor, give status immunity, and prime enemies with radiation make him a king of all trade support with no missing pieces. The real value engine for him is his passive, which makes Dante, Revenant, and Harrow's damage nullification look weak while having an easy spammable trigger condition. He can do it all better and with Helm's flexibility. He also has excellent augments like Phoenix Renewal, which add layers of undeath to him and his allies. Ultimately, S tier is the land of opportunity cost, and for Oberon, it's hard to find content where he's not the best support frame. Baruch is my pick for the funniest frame in the game. Baruch doesn't build shields, health, armor, use shield gating, or need support frames to enable him. He walks into a room with reactive storm procs influence and nukes the room and gives roar to his squad regardless of our Archimedia modifiers. He's one of the most content agnostic frames because he just always works or is baseline effective. A big reason he's S tier is because he has so much utility on top of the best exalted weapon. Lola is an excellent CC with good range, duration, and a line of sight check for convenience on top of him having the option to give his daggers to allies. Baruch makes it hard to play other frames due to how little he cares about his environment. He doesn't need allies, he doesn't need stats, he doesn't need duration, energy, efficiency, or range. He has excellent utility, flexibility, and Helmut. Baruch basically always adds more than most frames. He's the best jack of all trades frame. Kalervo is broken right now, and I will admit I'm a little biased as he is my favorite frame, so I want to give a quick history summary because it's important for why I think he deserves to make it into S tier. Kalervo releases one of the highest damage frames in the game, simultaneously being a multiplier frame, a damage spreader, and a weapons platform. This meant he could easily top the damage charts without setup. To offset this, D decided he should be made of chicken bones. This prompted the community to ask for buffs to his recompense, and this led to the state of Kalervo where he had 3 weaknesses. 1, his energy accounting for spamming recompense required significant investment. 2, the healing from recompense meant he didn't use his HP bar, and the state of HP tanking meant trying to use it was a bad idea past level 500. 3, Kalervo's recompense had an animation debt to pay if you wanted to use it to tank / play at those higher level ranges. Modern Kalervo no longer has these weaknesses because of volatile recompense and arcane persistence. Both combined to make it so he infinitely overguard gates, out heals incoming damage, and the only way for him to die is to step into a nullifier bubble, eat damage without overguard, and at that level of idiocy, any frame should die. The main issue with Kalervo is his selfishness. Currently he offers no utility / team support besides running a Helmut, using his 3 for allies, and not dying. Despite his focused nature, he has a lot of edge case advantages like breaking any melee, buffing single target guns with Collective Curse, and his ability to use volatile recompense on bosses to tank for Vazir's Tower on Strike Revive. Kalervo in his current state is one of the strongest, most effective frames for almost all content. Frost is the best utility frame and kind of does everything you'd want him to do. Frost's defense from Snow Globe is amazing, the ability to spam globes to stack their HP and refresh the Iron Skin absorption effect is the second best defensive utility in the game. Avalanche is also amazing for its CC, overguard, and cold / passive priming. Frost also has some of the best Helmut utility with Nourish allowing him to spam, and Roar can make him a decent weapons platform. He has a ton of arcane utility and niche but viable augments like Biting Frost to make him incredibly flexible. It's genuinely difficult to find a flaw in Frost even when he has 2 dead abilities and an average passive. The meme of Frost as a scaling frame isn't talked about enough. He has seen very few changes and continues to get better with every update. Not a single update has left Frost untouched. He genuinely just keeps benefiting from niche and semi-random tools that DE keeps adding. Dante is blatantly overtuned and has been since release. He has a frame with infinite overguard generation, nuking power, and a best-in-class support utility, and a busted exalted. At this point, I'm having to defend my take on why he isn't S tier. For me, it's because he has some issues. He doesn't have any CC, his nuking is relatively slow and conditional, and his exalted is only the 3rd best. I know, not number 1 in everything, what a fall off. Dante in terms of power and flexibility is S tier, but I wanted to rate S tier on meta warping and roll compression. Dante doesn't completely invalidate all other supports like Oberon, doesn't outdamage Galero, and doesn't do as much as Baruch and Frost. Harrow might be controversial, but I don't feel his gameplay requirements drag him down as much as other people think they do. Does Harrow want headshots, kills, and enemies to shoot him? Yes, but the likelihood you can't find 1k damage in Archimedia for his 4, regen shields for his 2, or use other energy sources for his 3 is far-fetched to me. I understand he's not perfect, but his weapon buffing, energy generation, and standing EHP is well above average like Dante. Plus, 12 seconds of immortality is broken when one of the only ways to die is telegraphed one-shots from above bows and bosses. Harrow does a bit of everything while having hyper-specialized valuable utility/niches in his kit that aren't outclassed by Oberon. Octavia is one I got some comments about. I think the issue people are encountering is dumping strength, maxing range, and expecting her 1 and 2 to work. Mallet is an incoming damage multiplier that is then multiplied by the number of enemies charmed. If you remove her 2 for Helmut, then you're going to lose damage and the ramp up time will be longer, furthering the issue. To be clear, Octavia isn't the cataclysm she once was, but there's a good reason DE hasn't given her all her augments yet. She's just that strong and hard to balance as it is. Advocating for Octavia to be lower is super confusing to me when she can invalidate the game with her damage, invisibility, and buffs. Ildren didn't jump up by chance, I genuinely just didn't know how Aegis Gale worked. Here's the video that made it click for me since it's not my build and it's one of the strongest things in the game. To summarize, her strengths, mass armor stripping, high damage, and fire rate AoE, and some CC/team utility is always going to be game breaking. Her weakness is that her shield utility isn't valuable in the damage nullification meta and she needs enemies to not be stripped already to work. Chroma is a big reason frames like Citrine, Anaros, and Rhino are so low. It is hard to be tanky, give DR, or buff weapons when Chroma is 75% of the power in all 3 aspects. Chroma's Guardian Armor Augment fixes his Vex armor generation, protects allies, and if DE fixes Arcane Persistence not working with quick thinking, I'd argue him to be S tier as the best tank frame. Currently, a tank isn't so valuable that it deserves a spot in S tier, but with new tools like Nidri, it is possible you might see a use for them in future content. Mirage can make even mid-tier guns powerhouses. If you give her any AoE weapon, she starts breaking the game. She also has less gameplay requirements than Gyre and Gauss. Gyre wants things that can apply electric or prime for her bolts, and Gauss has a battery to manage. Araxia is the best HP tank, while Chroma excels in team utility. Araxia has excellent CC, comparable weapons platform, and a bigger HP bar than Anaros. Revenant is still amazing. If you have any way of applying Vital for Reeve, Mesmer Shield, and a decent utility helmet, he's a solid I'm not going to die so we can't fail frame. Sadly, it's not enough to push him anywhere beyond number 3 in that role. Many of the frames in A are incredibly strong, but need something external or have external forces that push them out of viability in certain contexts. For example, Noko has no standing EHP, meaning he can't stand still and expect to live. This might sound dumb, but it's important for certain things like reviving, hacking, deploying his arc gun, or being stunned. Sometimes in Warframe, you have to be a body on the map. This is a serious issue for Noko because sometimes Noko literally can't interface with the game. He has terrible base stats, pure ability damage, and while he is self-sufficient, he isn't able to push the mission forward in all content. Despite this, we all know that Noko is a monster with some of the best AoE damage, survivability, and team buffing in the entire game. Sevagoth is another stellar frame with some glaring issues. Sevagoth is undoubtedly the strongest unique frame in the game. With adequate support and an efficient build, he makes it hard for enemies to appear on screen, which is why Sevagoth himself has poor base stats, a finicky revive passive, and struggles to do much else. He can buff allies, his guns, and heal, but doing these things eats into his tight build requirements. Whereas Noko is a frame I dislike for his animation debt despite his self-sufficiency, Sevagoth is a frame I dislike for his dependency and binary failure state, but damn, his damage is so high that he still makes it to 2nd place in A tier. Jade is a flexible and solid Warframe, capable of both solid damage and support utility. To be direct, Gloria is the reason Jade is so high and it acts as her best feature. Gloria is a powerful and effective damage ability capable of carrying poor Archimedia Lotus and squads. Plus, Jade has a good support kit. Buffs and effects aren't game warping like Dante, Oberon, and Harrow, but she's a solid pick regardless of content. She's the A tier equivalent of Baruch. She always works well regardless of circumstances. Wisp is an amazing frame. The only issue is that most HP frames don't need her anymore because they want status immunity from Oberon, Overguard, and damage immunity. Damage nullification is the #1 threat to Wisp. Being able to nullify all damage or negate status for Arcane Persistence is far more valuable currently. Her haste and shock mode plus her damage augment work insanely well to put her back into the meta, but it's not enough to let her dominate the meta in the ways that would carry her to A+. She's still a solid, inoffensive, and additive frame to all squads because of her flexibility. Protea is also losing out because of shield buffing being weak. Her augments remove some of her utility with Roar and her passive synergy, which makes her split her focus. She can generate orbs, does great damage on stripped targets, has impressive Roar scaling, and can shield gate for the entire squad. Protea is good at everything, but isn't beating out or contributing more than everyone in the tier with her. If she was, she'd be an A+ or S. She just does more things, so she averages out in the middle of the pack. Meg is another monster held back by some jank. She gives decent shield utility, defensive prowess, and armor stripping, but the only issue is that she's slow as balls when it comes to nuking. In any mission that has ability immunity or low enemy density, she can struggle to even play due to her poor standing EHP. Saren breaks every single weapon in the game, assuming it spreads status and wants corrosive or toxin. It's not a strict rule, but when paired with her middling DPS or survivability depending on helmet, she's more prone to RNG squad mates than other frames. If she gets the opportunity to use a good gun, get some steroids like Roar going, she will quickly start breaking the game, but much less than somebody like Sevagoth can with a similar amount of support. I expect the Gauss Mafia to show up again, but I just don't value this frame as much as everyone else. I find that he makes guns have poor ammo economy, doesn't work well with bad guns, and his nuking build isn't nearly as strong as specialized frames that also offer more utility or with higher ceilings. Despite this, he's still a monster with AoE, energy economy to spare, and a decent build, but he's just a little selfish and conditional on his battery. Veruna is another frame I rated much lower last time. I saw the Veruna nuking build and its infinite jank and moved on. That build is still jank and a bit weak, but I realized it's because I wasn't playing Veruna. Now I realized if I just use everything in tandem and approach her as a melee frame with a nuke/caster build backbone and use my weapons in between, she's far more effective. Plus she can give orb generation, prime for herself and allies, abuses good melees without being limited to them, and has solid invisibility status immunity and the option to do ability damage for the insane flexibility that gets her into AA. I want to highlight that we're no longer rating frames purely off their ranking and their roles/functions. We're now discussing frames that are excellent with some of the best functionality, but that have a couple of problems that can crop up in our current endgame. Grid is an excellent nuke frame with great shield getting, incredible energy economy, but abhorrent standing EHP and jank. This metric will keep coming up because when you lose operator abilities and enemies, you must still be able to do something. There are other issues with Gruda. A small part is her self-stagger on casting her abilities, which means running Kavot's Grace to prevent this. Gruda is also doing mostly ability damage, making her ineffective for bosses, and her helmet flexibility is poor. These combine to keep Gruda slightly underpowered from where she is in normal missions, and are issues that the frames above her don't contend with. Cyto 9 is another frame gifted with a care package of utility, mods, arcanes, and privileges, allowing him to play in 3 distinct ways. He can be a solid weapons platform if he gets a decent gun, uses Exalted Sniper for consistent but below average kills per minute, and Warframe Simulator with any gun that can abuse his elemental infusion or instant reloads. All of this is backed up by his infinite punch tree, wall hacks, invis, and instant reloads, making his uptime and range unparalleled. Sight still has flaws like needing weak point kills for his invis, poor base stats, poor melee synergy, and his best builds use weapons. Sight without random gear is broken, but lots of endgame content currently and likely in the future will be randomized, making me hesitant to rate Sight highly. From here on out, I'm going to highlight outliers because I have far less to say about every frame, and I hope people generally agree with the ones I don't mention. Caliban is a flexible frame. He can do decent damage, supportive utility, aggro draw, and stripping. His best effect is his Tau status, which helps many newer frames because of DE's preference for status-dependent kits. Caliban is a weird frame with a lot of edge case advantages from his Tau priming and summons that can make him quite solid. Cyanak gives shields, overguard, energy, and does decent damage less weapon platforming with augments. His issue is that it requires him to be between his two modes, in the air throwing javelins or on the ground casting and shooting, so his average output is lower than specialized frames. Jar is a great weapons platform with some issues. A big one is her ability to get started. If there is a nuke frame or a toxin eximus, Jar is one of the frames most likely to die or become useless. Jar's ceiling is remarkably high, but it's activating her consistently that can be a challenge. Gara is a frame I initially was going to put lower, but after reconsidering playing her more and testing her, she's quite strong. Her damage is solid, her CC is passable, and her utility is there with helmet flexibility, so she's a strong but imperfect frame. B+ is where we have a lot of hot topics. Many of these frames are fan favorites with edge case builds and stupid outputs. To rapid fire, Nezha is an excellent jack of all trades. He has good damage with any damage over time weapon. Tanks like Barukin can support almost as well, but needs augments for these niches. Mesa has insane damage, good survivability, and some utility, but is somewhat slow to ramp or relies on external tools to make her shine. And Aros finally does things, but he's still mostly an HP bar, and standing HP is only so valuable. Zephyr is an insane multiplier frame, but there's some cramped tiles, some casting times, and her tailwind has some jank with her poor base stats that keep her from being great. Zaku, much like Zephyr, has horrible base stats, but some of the best kit in the entire game if he can get setup support and has passable weapons/teammates to use. Uriel is a solid weapons platform, nuke frame, and EHP frame. He's the weakest he'll ever be right now, and it's hard to say he lights the world on fire. Kome is the first one I want to go in depth on. I love Kome. I think she's a great weapons platform with decent CC, and with even passable decree RNG, she's able to work. But there's a lot of if going on with her. If she doesn't have a gun, delete 1/3 of decree challenges. If she has no energy, another 1/3. If she has no melee, she can struggle to have damage even with decrees since it limits her pool. Kome is still able to survive, thrive with good conditions, and function under poor ones, but she's kind of the anti-Baruch. She needs something, and if given nothing, is just as shitty as Naros, Corvex, and Atlas. Citrine is completely outclassed right now. It's hard to justify playing a frame with so many Astros. She has long cast times, finicky coverage, and her support kit has been power crept by almost every support and hybrid frame. Ash, Tagath, and Korra have similar strengths. All three have amazing damage, good utility, and have some tool to sustain themselves, but they all fall behind the pack in something. Ash's kills per minute and utility is quite poor due to his damage dealing nature. Tagath can be immortal, do great damage and weapon buff, but her overall coverage, setup, and output isn't breaking the game. Korra has her cages, her weapon Venari, all of which make her effective, but she's held back by her reliance on shield getting and Whipclaw being an ability that cannot hit bosses. Titania and Wukong have identical strengths and weaknesses. Both are fast, have good exalteds, can use helmet, and can function in terms of survivability. Both frames have edge cases where they struggle. If a boss is immune to melee, Wukong sucks, but if you lose operator, Titania is rough to play because she can't exist outside of Razor Wing. They are strong, effective, and meta in some cases, but on the whole of the game, I don't value them as highly as others. Atlas, Grendel, and Lavos are similar too. They have amazing standing EHP, great damage, but are crippled by game design oversights. So many weird interactions happen with Atlas's fists, and he needs to use Rubble to stay tanky in some cases. Grendel can nuke, team support, shield gate, and gain status immunity, but can't do all of them at once like Araxia and Kalervo. To be clear, even if we don't compare him to Apex Frames, he still has less EHP than Anaros, less nuking than Nigatan isn't out supporting Citrine and Nesha. It's rough being Grendel. He's just not good enough without raw damage to handle bosses, and he needs to eat to live. Lavos is another frame with good nuking, good EHP, and good weapons platform, but it's all status dependent. It's a real shame that Lavos' augment got nerfed to be additive instead of multiplicative. It took an average status weapon user and made him stuck between two playstyles, neither of which worked better than his peers. We're now at the bad tier. For better or worse, that's how people are going to interpret it. I want to say B tier is still good, but I just don't see the use cases for these frames. Volt is still good at Eidolons, but Madara is also good at Eidolons after gaining Tower on mods. His nuking and summoner builds are solid options, but they aren't on the level of a proper nuking or damage frame in 2026. His utility from shield, speed, and his augments are decent, but generally if people need these tools, they're pre-made with you, and that's true for all frames. Excalibur cannot keep air in his lungs until DE gives him a lifesteal on melee, buff his base stats, or nerf Baruch. He's just such a hard sell. Excalibur is a multiplier frame held back by cast times, line of sight, simplicity, and helmet options. Temple is good, excellent in fact, but much like Excalibur, he's selfish, slow, and isn't optimal for endgame content. Lizzie is good for damage, he can be tanky enough, and he can buff crit, but nothing Temple does suggests to me he's good enough right now without augments. He's below Excalibur precisely because Excalibur can break the game with support, whereas Temple with support isn't as powerful. Aurelia is great, but she's not meta. Mirage, Gauss, Sight/Gyre, Uriel/Kome are all frames with higher ceilings, better overall kits, and are restricted to secondaries or augments to work. Aurelia is a mini Nesha, both are solid tank frames with minimal investment, but Nesha can do more support and damage with his augments. Nidus is jank as hell. Nidus has two builds, Umbral or Augments. Umbral works without setup and is optimal for Archimedia, but it doesn't do that much compared to Anaros. Augments take a long time to ramp, so it's only viable sometimes. Nidus is just a little underpowered right now because he needs augments to gain utility since his kit is on the weaker side. Navarre has so many issues. Why do we nerf a frame's movement and their invisibility? It's a blitzcrank situation of power creep. Having a drawback is unnecessary in modern day for invisibility. To be fair to Avara, she does have a great exalted, good multiplication, and some niches with Navigator. It's just a shame that her bow is weaker than all the melee influence frames, she has little to no CC, and Navigator is ultra limited in which weapons it breaks. Avara desperately needs buffs, she's one of my favorites, but I just can't justify playing a worse Side 09. Bobbin and Nyx are almost one-to-one in issues, both are old CC frames, both can strip resistance, both can buff weapons decently well, and neither are bad. Nyx can be immortal with her absorb augment, but self-slows are suspicious in current day. Nyx can also overguard, shield gain, use secondary radiate, but it's so much worse than normal builds or absorb immunity. Bobbin is far squishier, strips way worse than many frames, but his CC is insane. If overguard just didn't exist, he'd completely break the game, but right now he effectively has 3 dead abilities and a funny passive. Rhino is the most okay frame ever. He's tanky, gets 50% roar, and can't CC, but why would I play him over any of the full tanks with helmets that can build higher strength values or turn their brains off more? Equinox is one of my favorite frames, but she's terrible right now. Equinox is split between a bad support kit, a janky tank build, a decent nuking build, and no flexibility. To start, Equinox cannot meaningfully support a squad. She doesn't heal, shield, or contribute enough with Nightform. Rest is a fine CC, but all specialized CC frames dominate her in that niche. Pacify is good, but it has a weird range scaling, and the augment is misleading in its effectiveness. Men currently restores shields and health, which are entirely useless in 2026. Her nuking build is her saving grace. When DE changed armor, I thought, oh, Equinox can finally nuke without armor strip, but that wasn't the case. Equinox still struggles with armored enemies simply due to their EHP and the delay between her nukes. She's functional, but she isn't viable in that role. The last big issue with Equinox is that her augments are just mandatory for her to do anything with her kit. Peaceful Provocation is mandatory for a tanky Equinox or one that adds enough strength to compete with Noko. Energy Transfer is mandatory to play both forms at all. Common Frenzy is average on a mid ability. Caliban Stomp is a helmet with better output. Duality is fine, but it doesn't make Equinox a good damage frame / set and forget frame. She's still bad. Ember is my pick for the worst nuking frame. Healing Flame helps her stay alive at the expense of not using her 90% DR at all. Ember can shield gate and overguard gate, but her poor base stats make her dependent on that spam to work, and her output isn't that high. Sevagoth is squishier, but does infinitely more damage and doesn't have a heat meter to manage. Ember's single niche is good helmet value with her passive, but frames like Protea are better at even that. Necros isn't terrible, he's just the worst at everything he wants to do. Necros can tank, but he's not anywhere near as good as Wukong, Anaros, or Citrine. He can do orb gen, but that's it. When frames like Protea and Nova do so much more CC and damage, it's a hard sell. Necro's loot multiplication niche isn't valuable. Obviously, if you're grinding resources, you should run him, but Koro and Atlas are better overall frames and can do more things. Hydrate is a travesty, and that is my hot take. This frame needs all its augments to be base kit for me to even consider him playable. Viral Tempest can make Hydrate do damage, but with the armor changes, it's not strong enough even with Resurge or another multiplier. Tidal Impunity makes Tidal Surge a good ability, currently it's an instant Helma slot. Rousing Plunder would be good if it was base or multiplicative instead of additive with ability strength modifiers. Pilfering Storm is fine as is, but I am a massive hater of loot multiplication using bad frames because it's a rare niche. Hydroid got gutted with the armor changes and has naturally fallen off in both damage utility and speed in that niche. Hydroid's base stats are terrible. High base shield means he's bad at shield getting, and low base HP means he can barely use Plunder's armor buff. Corrosive has also been weakened significantly. It is no longer a top 4 element, and as such, it's just not valuable for most weapons. The only niche he absolutely dominates is Circuit. He's still a top 3 frame in that mode, but otherwise he's barely worth investing in. Corvex is another controversial ranking. Corvex is a damage frame with long setup time, average damage coverage, and average durability. Compared to Inaros, he is strictly squishier. Compared to Nyx, he is worse at CC/radiation. Compared to Alice, he does way less damage. Corvex is the ultimate intersection of mediocrity. He has ability damage, decent standing EHP, but offers nothing besides status immunity, priming, and mediocre CC to the squad. Banshee is my pick for the second worst turn in the game. If Loki wasn't knuckle dragging with 5 augments and 4 dead abilities, she'd be the worst. Fortunately, Banshee has some use cases. Her damage amplification from sonar, her stun from silence, and her shield gating is good enough to let her function as a glass cannon. Sight's Invis being added to the helmet was also a massive boon for her since she's one of the stronger, albeit slower Warframes that can use it. Soundquake and Sonic Boom are pretty terrible, but that's to be expected as we near the bottom of the tier list. So I originally planned to cover everyone, but as I was writing the Limbo/Loki/Banshee section, I realized it was fun to play with Limbo and Loki's concept. I'm going to be spinning my rework concept into its own video. Banshee is subjectively less in need of rework because she, like many frames, just needs quality of life or number buff/band-aid augments made base kit to be viable. I hope my tier list video being edited was more pleasant to watch, and I'm going to try and post 4 videos in 2026, so stay tuned. I'll see you again when I finish the Loki and Limbo rework video.